Welcome to the Visionaries Only podcast presented by Energy 11 and hosted by me, Jay Thomas. Thank you for joining for another episode of Visionary Greatness. This is episode 4, and this episode we have Chanel Smith, Esquire. She's an attorney at Legal Aid Society, and we talk a lot about her experience being a Black woman and defending families in court that are majority of Black and brown families. And I've never actually gotten to talk extensively to a lawyer like this before. And it was really interesting to understand that perspective. Not only her as a Black woman defending these families that look like her, but also the stuff you don't hear about. Like, I think as a lawyer, you immediately think of working on trials. You think of, at least I personally think of How to Get Away with Murder, because I'm watching that right now. But I think of like, you're out of order, this whole courtroom's out of order. Like, I think of those type of situations. But to understand the fact that lawyers operate sometimes like social workers, especially in the nonprofit space, and it's really, really interesting to understand the depth to which you have to ingratiate yourself into the experiences of these families. But also, and she wrote this really great article with Teen Vogue about secondary trauma, because exposure to that level of trauma can't be great for you as a lawyer, social worker, even like a detective or a police officer, where you're seeing like the worst of humanity over and over and over again. So we talked a lot about that. We talked a lot about mental health and taking care of yourself when you're in these types of roles. And we talked a lot about purpose. We talked a lot about how finding the thing that you want to do with your life doesn't always appear to be really obvious. And her epiphany really coming after she had already committed to being a lawyer. Her epiphany actually came in law school. So it was really interesting to understand how purpose can make itself known at different points in your life. Even when you've committed to a particular path, it can redirect you in a really specific way. And that's kind of what happened with Chanel here. It's probably the most in-depth, interesting conversation with someone that we've had thus far. And not to say that the conversations we've had previously weren't great, but this one really, it took a step further into the depth of the human experience. And I think folks will get a lot out of this. So I really hope you enjoy the episode. As always, please subscribe to the channel. Please hit the notification button. Give us a like. If you're listening to this and it's audio only, please consider giving us 5 stars. It really helps the platform to grow and build over time. And I'm just going to keep on keeping on with this. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy. I wanted to start here because birthdays, at least for me, and I think for most people, they're usually a time of like reflection and growth. And I'm curious, like, what was on your mind going into this particular birthday?
Oh, that's easy. So 2022 was a year of pure health for me,
Mm,
becoming healthy in all aspects. I am a big proponent of mental health and therapy. And I also started working out in August of last year. So I went into this trip like, wow, this is the healthiest I've been.
mm,
I'm physically healthy, I'm mentally healthy. I ended up taking most of December off from work because my job is extremely emotionally draining.
yeah.
And so I went into this birthday like, okay, you got a break from work in December. You're starting 2023 off cool. So now let's celebrate. Like, you're healthy. And so I went into Colombia like, yeah, like I went not needing it, like, cause sometimes you go on vacation. I had already taken time off from work. So
Mm-hmm.
this was like the first vacation I went on that like I didn't necessarily need it to rest. I really needed it to celebrate. So I count
Mm,
that to like me being in a healthier place. So
wow.
yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm happy that you're in that place now.
Mhm.
You know,
Oh,
you were
yeah.
proactive in that way.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
I'm extremely proactive when it comes to, mental health, like, that's my thing, so
Nice. I love to hear it because when I think of what you do for a living as a lawyer, and
Mhm,
I think of like black families, like the three top aspirational career goals that they want for their children. You go doctor, engineer, and shortly after is lawyer, and not necessarily in
mhm.
that order. And I'm curious for you, is this what you wanted to do with your career? And at what age did you decide that this was where you were going to head?
So if you ask my parents, this is the story. I don't remember this moment, but when I was
Uh,
in 1st grade, I was in first of all, I've always been a talker. I've always been like a chatterbox, quote unquote. So, in 1st grade, I don't remember why I was with my, teacher at the time during lunch, but I was with her, and she was reading the, New York Law Journal. So I asked her, like, "What are you reading?" And she, told me what she was reading, and then I came home and I said to my parents, "I wanna be a lawyer." And my dad was like, "What? Like, we don't have no lawyers in my family," which later we found out that my father's uncle went to law school, but he didn't finish.
mm,
Um, so we were like, we don't have any lawyers in our family, so where did like this idea of you becoming a lawyer come from? So since the 1st grade, I've always wanted to be a lawyer. It was my idea, it was nobody else's. My parents, honestly, my parents just wanted me to finish school.
hmm
Once I did undergrad, they didn't really care what I did after. Like, as long as I stuck through whatever I said I was gonna do, like,
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
I look at the careers like doctor, engineer, and lawyer. And one
Mhm,
of the things that's pretty consistent is that one, it's a long, arduous journey. And if you really don't want to do it, you're not going to make
mhm,
it all the way through. And I've seen people
mhm,
fall out during the process. So for you, when when you looked at the journey of a lawyer and what it took to become that, was there any hesitation at all at any point?
no. I don't in hindsight, I don't think I ever looked at the journey.
Mm,
I don't think I ever looked at it and said, "Okay, this is what it's gonna take. How am I gonna do it?" I just did it. Like,
mm,
I didn't have a plan B. Like, I knew this was what I was gonna do, and if it didn't work out, I didn't know what I was going to do. I think that the hardest part of my getting to this journey, like, were all the exams that you have to take, because I've always had, test anxiety. Well, I have anxiety, period.
mhm,
And so I never was, I've always been like an A student. I didn't get my first C until law school, but like
mm,
standardized tests were always like hard for me.
yeah,
So that was really the hardest part of the journey, but that's what you have to do to get there. So
yeah,
that was the only thing I looked at. I never looked at, oh, well, it's going to take me 7 years and all this. I didn't look at it from that lens. I don't think I ever, like, thought about, like, piece by piece.
yeah.
I just went with it.
What is it do you think about law outside of the fact that that you were deemed a chatterbox? But what was it about law that you think attracted to you and kept you in it? Because that's a really like important part, the fact that you actually stuck with it
Mhm,
all these years.
mhm. Um, uh, I don't think that I really so the way I see it is sometimes, like, God plants a seed in us, and we may not necessarily know why until we get there. So, I don't think up until maybe undergrad, I knew why. Like, throughout my journey, like, from, like, a young child to now, I've always loved to help people. I've always
Mm-hmm.
done community service. I've always been in leadership positions. In high school, I was in leadership positions. In undergrad, I was in leadership positions. Law school, same thing. So I always knew like that. That's why it's so interesting for me. That's how I know something had to just be planted into me because
Mm-hmm.
I never thought these things out. Like I never really, I just knew it was something that was going to happen. Um, and I also understood like the significance of the position, uh, because lawyers really help maneuver society. So we have so much power in what we can do. And so I knew that there was a level of access and power that I would obtain. And I didn't really understand that until undergrad, until I really knew, okay, like we're headed to law school. Now, we have to figure out what type of law we want to do, what do we want to use with that. And so my hunger to help people, I would say, would be why I stayed in this. Like, there's never been any doubt that this wasn't going to happen or that I would stop doing this. Like, even as like over it, I am sometimes now. I'm not ready. I'm not
Yeah.
ready to leave the legal field yet until I feel empty that like
Mm.
I really poured out what I need to in this career.
Wow. And while you were chasing this dream of being a lawyer, how did you make the decision on the type of law that you actually wanted to pursue?
Okay. So I definitely have a story for this.
Yeah,
So when I
okay.
went into law school, I just knew I was going to do intellectual property. So that's basically trademarks, copyrights, things like that, or
Mm,
entertainment law. Right now entertainment law is so big for a lot of people, especially people of color.
mhm.
And so I knew that I don't know where I thought that was coming from. Don't even know why, but I just knew that that was where I was going to go do transactional stuff. Um, but then I remember being in your first year of law school, you take, no matter what school you go to, you take the same 7 courses.
Mhm.
And so um, I was taking criminal law, introduction to criminal law, which one of the classes that you take your first year. And we were learning about this case in South Central in the 90s or the 80s, Lakeisha Harlan, where she was 15. I'm not sure if you are aware of this story, but she was 15 and she went into what we would call a bodega in New
Yeah.
York in South Central, and she went to buy orange juice and the Korean store owner thought she was stealing. So this was right after Rodney King. So I'm
Mm,
probably getting the time frame wrong. But so everybody's already hyped because of the Rodney King um incident. So the person thought that she was stealing and like basically like attacked her and she being a 15-year-old, she responds back. She leaves the orange juice because in the video, it's on YouTube, you can see the woman throwing like a stool at her, reaching over the counter at her
mm.
because she thinks she's stealing. She puts the orange juice on the counter, walks out, and the owner shoots her in the back of the head. And when the
Wow.
police got there, she had $2 in her hand. So she was going to pay. She wasn't stealing. So my professor at the time asked, so in law school, your first year, your classes are extremely big. You probably have like 80 to 100 students in one class. So my professor is like, okay, how many of y'all think that she should have got the max sentence, which was 15 years? The lowest was no years probation. Um, and then it was like 5 years middle sentencing. And the only students in the classroom who thought she should have got the maximum time were the maybe 8 of us who were minorities, not black, but minority. Um, and everyone else didn't believe that she should get anything.
Wow.
And It was
Mm.
in that moment I said, I have to do something with this. And I tell this story every time because I knew then that I didn't know at that moment that I was going to work with kids, youth, but I knew that I was going to work with underrepresented audiences. Like, I knew that for sure because I just couldn't understand how this 15-year-old being shot as she's retreating, like, how did we all not just watch that same video, right? Like,
Right.
so that was the moment where I said, I'm going to help people. I knew that I wanted to help people. And then as I went through law school, I realized I wanted to be a litigator. I wanted to be in court. I wanted to argue, um, and really do good trial work. So
Yeah.
that that's how that all played out.
Wow. You said you had a story. That's a hell of a story.
Yeah,
Whew. Damn.
yeah,
That hit me a little bit. I ain't gonna lie. That wow.
yeah, yeah.
Them that that must have been like this like powerful symbolism of the way that the majority thinks, right? Minorities being
Mhm.
the eight of you in this 80 to 100 person class, and the majority of people saying like, no, this person didn't deserve the max, and then that you see that
Right.
played out in real time in
Mhm.
the news and in recent situations where police do some heinous crimes and get away with it. So that
Right. Right.
the
And then
symbolism of that is
also
crazy.
that same year was the year that Eric Garner was murdered.
Mm,
And my friends actually wrote a letter to the school that we all ended up signing, the Black students, because our, we say colleague, whatever, but classmate, colleague, whatever,
hmm.
they were just spewing all kinds of racist things and on Facebook, and we would show administration like as Black people who are here, we don't feel protected, we don't feel represented. Um, the school's response to that was whatever.
Right.
Um, they did what they thought was proper. I still debate on that, but whatever.
Yeah.
And so that also, seeing that in law school not only showed me what I wanted to do like on a career level, but also what I wanted to do outside of my day to day, which is really mentoring students
Mm,
and being very active when it comes to um, future lawyers, obviously, but just any young person of color that needs direction because I didn't have that. And I learned it. It was hard. There's power in that, but I also think that it shouldn't be that hard and we should have help along the way.
yeah.
Um, so that helped me to be able to really, like, that is what I really love to do. I really
Yeah.
love to help students. So, yeah.
Yeah. I joined a mentorship program some years back as a mentor, and uh I've said it's the greatest role I've ever had. That's a pretty good roles.
Mhm.
So and but that being the mentor to these like geez, they were in high school and now they're in college now.
Mhm.
It's so crazy to see the growth, but like you kind of come in at this like super pivotal time. And I always say like people in our age range talking to like high schools, even middle schoolers, and then college students, of course, we're like old enough to be respected by them, but young enough to relate.
Mhm.
And
Right.
the impact that that has, because you're right. Like when I look back, all my mentors were people that I saw on TV. Like
Mhm.
those are the
Yeah.
people, you know. We're recording this by the way on the anniversary of Kobe Bryant and his daughters and the other
Right.
folks that were in the helicopter in their on their the day of their passing. And he was one of those mentors to me from afar.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's wonderful that you're doing that work now, especially given the experiences that you've had.
Mhm. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Um, you mentioned the courtroom, and I'm glad that you said that you wanted to be a litigator because I have a
Mhm.
question that I have been wondering
Mhm.
for a really long time, but have not had a lawyer to ask. So I've never been in a courtroom ever, I don't think. And
Okay.
hopefully I won't have to for any
Good.
known reasons.
Good. Right.
um, but how accurate are TV shows like Judge Mathis and like How to Get Away with Murder? How accurate are they to what actually goes on in a courtroom?
They're not. I don't
Oh man.
particularly watch. I don't like to watch legal shows. Although I do have some movies that I do like Mississippi Burning or
Mhm.
to Kill a Murderer. Like, but those are more because of like their significance to like the civil rights movement.
Mm.
But to like How to Get Away with Murder, I never watched. I don't watch Suits. I don't watch.
Oh, I've
I
watched
did watch
Suits.
Your Honor. Your
Oh, I
Honor
need to
is
watch that.
amazing.
Yeah,
That
okay.
is
I
an
gotta get
amazing.
on that.
So that is definitely pretty accurate.
Okay.
And the parts that are not accurate for me is these like aha moments. Those don't happen. Like you don't catch somebody and you have this groundbreaking, like very rare that you have this like aha moment on the stand where it's like got you. Like
Mm.
you have to work extremely. A trial work is not easy. Like
Hmm.
it's tenuous. Like you have to do a lot of prep. And so that stuff, the type of evidence they use, I'm like, it would never happen. The things that the attorneys say, I'm like, you would be held in contempt. Like, you wouldn't even be able to go back and forth with the witness like this. Like, this
Yeah.
is and then I'll be yelling at the screen, like, that's an objection. Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we here? So, no, I hate it. It's not. However, I work in family court. So family court is very dramatic and
Mm.
very you see some stuff.
Yeah.
So it can be dramatic as TV, but that is because, parents are just usually
A little over the top.
what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah. Yeah.
A little over the
So
top.
um yeah, and rightfully so, because it's dealing with
Yeah.
their children. So I understand that aspect of it. So,
Yeah.
but not criminal cases, absolutely not. Like
No.
money cases, civil cases, no, not at
No.
all. No, it's not the same.
you know,
In
I
my opinion, it's not.
I thought of is oh god, I'm blanking on the movie. I'll add it in post, but it was with Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise. This is an old movie or older movie or whatever. And when they were like, "You're out of order. This whole courtroom's out of order." You don't remember? You remember
Oh
that?
yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking like,
Oh God.
oh, it was like,
Um,
oh
is
no,
that
you
the
can't
You
handle.
Can't Handle the Truth?
Yes, you
Oh
can't.
God, what is the name of that movie?
I'm blanking on the movie,
That would
but
never happen.
yeah.
That would never happen. The judge would be like, counsel, what? No,
So,
like absolutely not. Now, I will say,
hmm,
judges, however,
hmm,
they say whatever they want. Like that, when you see some of these judges like on these shows or
like
like
Judge
Judge
Mathis.
Judy was an actual, yeah, like these those two were actual like lawyers. Like some of them are not real lawyers.
Mm.
They didn't practice, some of them, but those two for sure. And I have colleagues who worked with Judge Judy. And what you see on TV is how she was really. She was a family court judge in Manhattan for years,
Mm.
and that's how she was. Um, Judges typically say and do what they want to do. So, sorry, judges. I mean, you guys do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So,
listen, if
yeah,
the legal shoe fits, you know.
Right, exactly. And even if it doesn't, they're gonna do it. They have what they like to call discretion. So they
mm,
are allowed to do what
mm.
they feel is in their discretion. So,
Did you choose a legal aid society specifically because of the work that you wanted to do? Did you like avoid like private law because of
absolutely.
the yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Um are there other nonprofits like Legal Aid Society, or is Legal Aid Society, or maybe it's the biggest, is it the biggest of the group kind of?
It is they're the oldest, but there are many other organizations. There's Harlem's Neighborhood Defender Services in Brooklyn. There's BDS Brooklyn Defender Services, Bronx Defender Services. There's Legal Services, Queens Legal Service, Brooklyn Legal Service. So um everybody always says like when they go to court, they're getting a legal aid, which is like that term. So just to clarify,
Yeah.
no, every state has a legal aid, right?
Mhm.
And all that means is just like a appointed attorney. That doesn't necessarily mean like the Legal Aid Society
Mhm.
or Brooklyn's Defender Service. Like there are so many of us. So like people
Mhm.
automatically be like, oh, you're like, oh, I got a legal aid. You may not necessarily have the Legal Aid Society. You may have like again, there's Center for Family Representation. There's ACLU, which is like a huge national organization that works with different human rights. So there are many of us. Um,
Got you.
Many, many, many. And some of us do particular things. So like where I work, we do criminal, civil, and juvenile justice. Not every organization does. Like so for example, in family court, we don't get custody and visitation cases straight out unless we like
Mhm.
already have the case and then it turns into that. But there's
Mhm.
a whole children's society that they're literally called like Children's Aid. They do that. Like they represent all the kids like in New York City
Mhm.
on like custody cases. So we all may have different contracts to do like different um, free legal services in the boroughs.
Got you. Got you.
Yeah.
And so you work for Legal Aid Society, but you also, and you do family court cases. Did you
Hmm.
specifically choose family court cases, or was that given to you when you started working there?
I did. I did. So I applied to our juvenile rights practice. So in our juvenile rights practice, we represent kids on abuse and neglect cases, and then we
Mm.
represent kids on delinquency matters. So those youth who get arrested
Mm.
in the boroughs. So in law school, I worked at our law school's clinic, which is like an intern externship, but it's a class through your law school, and you're actually representing people.
Mhm.
And so I did that for 2 years, representing kids, getting them immigration status in the U.S. So I knew
Mm.
at that point, okay, I love working with kids. I love children's rights and issues. So I applied to legal aid because we have this huge portion of our organization that
Mhm.
works with trial work with children.
Got you. Got you. And
Hmm.
you mentioned this earlier about like the emotional toll. And I
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think of like social workers, I think of like
Hmm.
people in law enforcement, detectives and stuff like that that are like exposed to some of the
Hmm.
hardest ills to swallow of the world.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'm curious for you. You mentioned how big mental health is for you. How are you able to uh, how are you able to work within this space while still protecting your
Hmm.
own mental space?
So it's funny that you asked that. So I just wrote, well, not just, but back in November, I wrote a op-ed for Teen Vogue on
Mhm.
secondary trauma, what it's like being a Black woman representing Black and brown children that look like
Yep.
you,
Yep.
and just overall, just seeing and overall, and also dealing with your own trauma from being a Black person and all the things that we go through that deal with race, and then that has nothing to do with your race, it's just life circumstance.
Right.
And so I've been practicing. October will make 7 years. Um, and so I am still learning
Hmm.
how to cope. Like I said, December I took most of off because from September to the beginning of December I was working nonstop. I was had so many trials, so many motions to write. Then like I said, I mentor students. I'm a mock trial coach. I teach on the weekends. And so, like,
Wow.
I was just so burnt out. And
Yeah.
all of December, I just shut down everything. I didn't do anything. I literally was like home in bed for like 2 weeks. And I
Wow.
just rested and I just replenished. And I had to learn how to self-soothe and not stimulate myself, because I'm definitely like the type of person, if I'm not doing something I feel like I'm wasting time.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn that that's not healthy either. Like, you don't always have to be doing, like sometimes you really need to stop. And so I have two therapists um that I
Mm.
speak to weekly,
Wow.
a man and a woman.
Hmm.
I invest heavy in
Yeah.
that. Also this year I started medication for my anxiety
Mm.
because I, it was burnout is really real. It's really real, and when you have like anxiety, it's hard to stop yourself because you're so hard on yourself. Even
Yeah.
though you know you're burnt out, in the back of your mind, you're like, well, if I don't do this, this is not gonna work. And then, representing kids, I'm like, I can't fail my clients, because they're
Mm.
children and they're not adults where, like, obviously if an adult client needs something right away, you
Yeah.
have to do it, but they can wait. I'm
Right.
representing kids who are getting taken from their parents today and they
Mm.
want to go back home today, or they go to pick up a kid and they're freaking out and they're calling me saying, can you calm this 10-year-old down, and all this stuff.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I just was getting to the point where I was just so overwhelmed, and half of it was me because was a perfectionist. um
Mm.
and so I started medication, which has transformed my life completely, to the
Wow.
point where, like, now I can focus, and like, if it didn't get done, it didn't get done. Like, I'm not feeling bad. Like, I am just like chill. Just
Yeah.
like, it's funny. We have, our mutual friend Katema, and I was talking to him the other
Yeah.
day, and he was like, I don't know what you're on, but I need that because you're just like a whole different person. He's like, you're a whole different person. And I'm like, listen, like, anybody that knows me, like, that speaks to me daily, now that has seen like the significant shift that it has
Hmm.
made for me, like, I am now like a proponent when it's necessary and regulated. Like, sometimes you do need a pill to regulate you. And like,
Mm.
it has made such a significant difference for me, and like my high emotional, like, area of the law, and just in life period. Just It just
Yeah.
helps you to balance. And
Yeah.
for someone like me who is very involved with a lot of stuff, who does a lot, I need balance. Like,
Yeah.
I need organization, I need balance in my life, because chaos just doesn't work for me. So
So now going back, ingratiating yourself back into this work now because you were on vacation.
mhm,
How
mhm.
are you making any changes to the workload, or is it pretty much staying the same?
It's staying the same. That doesn't change. At one time, on average, I represent about 120 kids.
Wow.
So that's on average. And so that doesn't. That doesn't change. I think right now I probably have like 100, probably like 100, which is still, a lot. Um, but that's it's more manageable. There was one time I had like 150 and I was like, oh my God, this is a lot. Um, but the workload doesn't change because you get the cases that you get. And there's
Yeah.
nothing that can be done about that. So that's why it's important to take, when you know the type of field that you're in, and in my particular field, I know like the numbers that we deal with. So it's very important to take that time to yourself to just rejuvenate, because you don't work well. I don't work well with, when I'm like that. I mean, I work well on the workload aspect. Like, I'm still active on my cases, doing what I need to do. But outside of work, I'm just like depleted.
Yeah.
Like, I can only literally show up for work, and then everything else fails because you're depleted.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. That's
but
that's more than a daycare. Like
right. But like in my article, my article starts with me talking about back in October, my one of my clients that's 8, her mother was shot and killed. And it talks about that moment, because that was around the time where I was feeling so burnt out and just having so much to do. And, I talk about that phone call that I got, because it was just like, oh my God, here we go. Like, more to add. And then having
yeah.
to talk to that year-old child.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not a social worker, but in a sense, a part of my job with working with kids incorporates that. And we have social workers and paralegals. I love and adore my team, because I understand that I can't do my job without their expertise. Because
Yeah.
as lawyers, we're always thinking about like the end goal. And when you have a team of a social worker and a paralegal, they're able to see things from a different lens, and they're able to have these difficult conversations with me, with clients. They're able to go to meetings to
Mm.
advocate on a different level that I'm not skilled in. So, I absolutely adore people who are in those particular fields, because it really assists us, and they
Yeah.
don't get a lot of credit. And so when this happened, like had to take a couple of days off of work. My team were broken up into like 5 attorneys on each day of the week. So I'm on like the
Mm.
Tuesday team. So any new cases that come in on Tuesday, we take them. And like my teammates, they, sending me to Starbucks and just like
Yeah.
encouraging me, because at that time I also was working on a huge case, that it was a new law. So a lot of us hadn't had experience with it, and I had to appeal it. And so that required me to do a lot of research, because again, it was new,
Mm.
while still defending and representing 100 kids, and having to figure out things on all their cases. So and then I was hurt. It was on the news.
Oh
So
wow.
it was a media case at that. It just was, it was a lot. It was a lot. And I had to take that time to
Yeah.
myself, and but as my article states, that there's a need for us to do that work. And when I say us, I mean people of color, and specifically Black people, because 90% of my clients are either Black or Latina. And they need to see people that look like them.
Yeah.
They do. And there's 4%, 2 to 4% of the legal field are Black people, which is not a lot. And I
Right.
would say out of that 4%, most Black attorneys go into the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, you make more money, um, but it is more intense as far as your workload. So you have to pick and choose. Do you want work-life balance with emotion, or do you want big bucks, but you get no time to spend that money because you're working?
Yeah.
Like, most of my friends that have worked in corporate America, they've left after a while because their burnout is real too. Like,
Right.
no matter where you go in the law, burnout is real. And so like I wanted my article to end with encouraging people to stay, because there are moments where I do feel like, wow, like I did a great job. Like, and I'm reminded, actually last week before I went on vacation for my birthday, I met a new client, this 7-year-old, and I'm talking to him, and in that, like, just the way we were interacting and just explaining to him what was going on with his parents, which can be
Mm-hmm.
a hard conversation to have,
Yeah.
I was reminded, like, this is why you do this work.
Mm.
Like, I was reminded in that moment, and I have those moments. And so I try to hold on to those moments when I get overwhelmed. Like, there's a purpose and there's a reason. Um, and then I talk about the things that we can do, like going on vacation, taking your vacation time. For me, I go to the spa once a month.
Mm.
Um, I try not to miss that for
Yeah.
myself. I take my days off. I don't play when it comes to days off. I also have a supportive supervisor team. So like
Yeah.
they encourage you to take your time off. We have something called the tranquility box in our office, which has like aromatherapy, like
Mm.
different Zen music you can play in your office, like stress balls, things that you can do to kind of like de-stress.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, it's an ongoing practice of
Yeah.
coping with work.
Yeah.
So I'm no expert, but I do know going forward what works for me. So, when I go back to work on Monday,
Mm-hmm.
I've had this week off in Colombia, so I'm good. Um, and so far, at least for February, my caseload is not crazy. But at any moment, anything can happen. So that's the
Yeah.
thing you can't prepare for. But so
I
I'm just winging it.
yeah. I still can't even conceptualize 100 children on your case. Like I can't even.
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah,
that's
and
insane.
they're all different age groups. So
Mm.
you have clients from the day they're born till they age out of foster care, which is 21. So, and
Mm.
that's if they're in foster care. If they're not in foster care, the case ends at when they're 18 or whenever the case ends. But
Mm.
I would say I have a fair amount of like babies right now, which that's easier because I am what we call substituting judgment. Like I'm doing what's in their best interest. But in
Mm-hmm.
New York, when a kid is over 7, you have to do what they want. So that
Oh.
requires another level of skill, right? Of talking to them, get understanding what they want, which you'll be surprised. It's not as difficult. There are
Okay.
cases where it is difficult, but for the most part, kids know what's going on.
Yeah. Uh,
One thing you learn is kids are not. They always will love their parents. They will
mm-hmm.
always love their parents, and they'll know when their parents have issues. And then you have to have difficult conversations with them with
Yeah.
that love balance, knowing they need help, and so.
Wow. Wow. I'm so glad. This
But
is this is so.
I'm a big proponent though of family though. I need
Mm-hmm.
to say that because
Mm-hmm.
uh the system has a huge habit of destroying families, particularly
Mm.
families of color.
Mm-hmm.
And every family that's in family court doesn't necessarily need to be there. I would
Mm.
say most of them don't. I'm There are many cases that I'm like, we didn't need to be here. We didn't need to be here. And there are some where, okay, there is intervention that's needed,
Yeah.
but some of this stuff is mm-mm,
What
can
what's
be avoided.
what's an example of a case that could have been avoided, did not need any intervention?
Dirty home cases, cases where a parent is clearly overwhelmed with,
Mm.
being a parent. Those cases. or um also sometimes like different levels of excessive corporal punishment. I mean, it's like it's hard to say. It's like you know
Yeah.
when you know. You
Yeah.
know it when you see it. Like there are just some cases where parents are overwhelmed. Like I've had cases where a parent left like a 10-year-old home so they
Hmm.
could like they had to go to work. They
Hmm.
had nobody to watch their kid. Like
Yeah.
I don't like that to me doesn't necessarily mean that the parent needs their child taken away,
Right.
and
Yeah.
or a child is missing school. Those
Hmm.
cases,
Hmm.
or like a parent, you're not supposed, and in New York, you're not supposed to hit your child with a belt. Um,
What? That's
a
a rule?
parent that
When they why wasn't that a rule when I was growing up?
it was, but listen,
Oh.
it's cultural. It's cultural. Then there's a lot of things that are cultural too. That like it's like there are obvious cases, drug cases, extreme mental health cases,
Hmm.
abuse cases, certain levels of DV that require children to be protected and taken. But then
Yeah.
there's some cases that we all know what we see, and we're like, okay, does this really need court intervention? Why can't a community-based program assist this family?
Hmm.
And that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like it once the government gets in your family's life,
Mm. Yeah.
it's very hard for that to end. It's very
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard. The again, I I don't know if I can say 50-50 or 60-40, but I
Hmm.
do have a lot of cases where there does not I don't believe that there needs to be extreme court intervention,
Hmm.
because we have to be careful that a lot of the judges are not coming from the places that these families do, and they see parenting from a different lens.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of the people who prosecute parents see family from a different lens. So it
Right.
may not necessarily be that a child needs to be taken or a family needs to be supervised for a long period of time. Everything is case by case. Some people don't see it that way. I see it that way, that
Yeah.
every situation is not the same.
Yeah.
And I try not to look at it that way, that if I seen it one time, that means this is the same way.
Right.
Because you can't, but there are a lot of people that do. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's what makes a good lawyer, is someone
Yeah.
who can look at every instance and see what's particular about this case and not bring bias from everything else you've done to like determine what's going on in one particular case.
Well, that's what makes you good at what you do, right? Um,
That's right.
for someone that might maybe be in law school, thinking about law school, now that you said October will be 7 years.
hmm
So practicing for 7 years, what's something you learned as a lawyer that you just like law school can never prepare you for? What did you
Law
learn?
school can law school can never prepare you for the day-to-day job. It can't.
Mhm.
Unless you take proactive steps to engulf yourself in experiences that will teach you what it's like to work in whatever particular field. And what I always tell my students is the day you get hired should not be the day that you've had like that experience in that particular job. You have to be proactive with taking internships that
Mm.
actually are allowing you to get your hands dirty in this field so you can know if you really want to do it. Um, you have to like take these clinical courses. Like, so for me, I knew I wanted to litigate. So there are certain trial classes you can take that teach you that. I competed on the mock trial team. I'm one of the mock trial team coaches now. Um, I just engulfed myself. I knew I wanted to work for legal aid. So I interned with them. I interned with another nonprofit called NILAG, which they do similar work as legal aid, with working with people with like social benefits. So I'm able to I also made sure I got my hands um in like different parts of social justice work and what we call public interest work. So I worked for an organization that did like HRA work with parents or just regular people, like what happens when you need your social security, what happens when you have an issue with NYCHA and you need to go to housing court. Like I did all these different things because, representing kids, sometimes they get taken because the parent doesn't have housing. And so what are we doing to help the parent get housing? Or, maybe the parent has mental health issues and the housing we see is deplorable. And in that case, the kid has to be removed. Like, how are we assisting the parent to get their mental health under wraps? Can it be? Because, a lot of times it can't be, depending on, what the diagnosis is. But then we have to talk to shelters. And so, like, I made sure in law school, like, I did different things that exposed me to the different agencies in New York City so that I could be able to assist, families with, I don't know every agency you go to, but I know a good amount of them. So I would say law school doesn't teach you that. Law school teaches you how to pass an exam, how to be ranked top 50 so you can get hired at a big law firm and make six figures and leave after 4 or 5 years, because that's what usually people do anyway. Or, law school teaches you to get ready for the bar, which is the hardest exam ever. And the stuff that you will never use again. A lot of the stuff that I learned in law school, I'll never use again. Like I work in a niche field. Most of us work in a niche field where we don't need half the stuff we learned in law school. So, but we also, after your first year of law school, you control some of what you take. So that's why I tell people, if you kind of know that you want to do mergers and acquisition, okay, you should be taking a drafting course on contracts. You should be like tuning up on your writing. If you want to litigate, you should be taking trial courses. You should be taking courses that will teach you how to write a motion, because, a contract and a motion are two different legal writings. So you have to know the difference. You should be exposing yourself to that. I also tell my students that you are a brand as soon as you start law school. Law school is not undergrad. It is professional school. You are branding yourself. You are networking from day one. You are building your rapport with everyone, because you will meet certain people throughout your career. And so you have to start building your resume. You have to start building that rapport and networking and working extremely hard. And it's also the best time to figure out what you want. And even if you start in your career, you may not want to continue to do it. But at least you've gained some experience where you can move around, because most places want you to have experience, and they want experience in that field. If I did contractual work for 2 years and then I decide I want to be a litigator, who's going to hire me if I've never litigated a case? Yeah, I've written a contract, but I've never argued a case. I've never done a motion. I don't know the rules of procedure. So like, and even in that, you can get hired, but you have, as a practitioner, have to take responsibility in teaching yourself that. So law school doesn't teach you it doesn't teach you all that stuff. It doesn't teach you the practical day to day. It's just it's like the purge. Like law school is literally like survival of the fittest. It is like it's hard.
It's like the purge.
It's hazing. Law school is hazing. Oh my God. Law school's tough. It is tough. It is, before law school, I was always in AP courses. I graduated undergrad with honors, A student, and you go from being the smart person to being in the room with smart people. And it like I said, I got my first C in law school. Like I didn't get one C, I got multiple. And I was just like, what are you like? What? Like you're smart. Like you're
Yeah.
smart. What are you doing? Like
Yeah.
you're in a top 100 ranked school. Like what are you
Mhm.
doing? And but it is a different beast.
Yeah.
It is
Man.
it's the purge.
I,
It's the purge.
I think a lot of people are gonna appreciate your breakdown of of law school and what it doesn't teach you. Um
Mhm.
the last thing I wanted to ask you is what I ask every guest on here is what is a quote that you personally live by?
A quote. Um, let's see. A quote that I
Everybody
live
always has
by.
this reaction and it's funny.
Yeah, because I don't really live by quotes. I mean, I think that I live by certain like scriptures. Like there are certain ones that I hold near and dear to my heart.
Oh, okay.
Um that so let's see a good one.
Mhm.
Let me see. I'm going blank right now. So like Romans 8:28, all things work for my good. Um
Mm.
that like I that is like that's been my last year season. Like everything I went
Mhm.
through in 2022, it all worked out for my good, honestly. Like in hindsight.
Yeah.
And that's something that I live by. There's another scripture and it's the actual sight is not hitting me, but it says that after you've suffered a while, you will be established. And so like I
Mm.
remind myself that like even when I'm burnt out and having this, like there's an establishment period that comes after that. So like even if you're going through like this rough patch, like, you know, there's an establishment part or like Romans 8:18 that, you know, that after like the like anything with suffering, after that sufferation period, like there comes this like, you know, I declare that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared to the glory that'll be revealed after. Like those are the quotes that really resonate with me because like we go through these processes of life and then there's gold after. And like
Mm.
I have to like in my field, I have to constantly remind myself that like after this, it works out for your good. And after
Yeah.
you've suffered and worked hard and with getting to being a lawyer, it was a 7 years of all this schooling and preparation and networking. Here I
Yeah.
am, like almost 7 years in and thriving in my career. Some people are not practicing anymore that I know. Some people have left the legal field completely. Some people that I started in law school with didn't even continue. They
Yeah.
left. And there are a lot of people I know that are in transitional periods of their
Yeah.
lives that are not lawyers, that are
Mhm.
just regular professionals. And I just feel like everyone's trying to figure it out. And so I just try to remind myself like this is a process. And then after you go through it, everything just it comes together. And it's always for your good. So
I haven't had anybody quote scripture yet, so thank you for that. That's that was beautiful. That was beautiful.